Azerbaijan heated up again. Um, that's going to be concerning as Russia starts losing in their west and start to become weaker within their own country. What happens along their borders? So that's concerning as it starts to spread.
Yes. Indeed.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, what do we
I
want
I
to
will
have
not.
happen in those countries?
Yeah, I'm not going to pass judgment on that. But anytime there's expanded war and conflict, is usually a bad thing. But it is definitely a reset in the order in southwestern Asia and central Asia. It's probably pent up stuff that these countries have been wanting for a while. But if you look at the borders of the stans, mostly Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, the way, just take a look at your Google Maps and the borders. The way they drew those things is almost like somebody set it up for there to be a fight in the future anyway. No different than what Stalin did with Armenia and Azerbaijan.
You mean arbitrary borders?
Oh, there is land within the land. It's almost like if Mexico had a major city just north of the Rio Grande, but yet it was not contiguous. You know what I mean? You had to pass through U.S.
Yes,
property, then go to San Antonio. And that's Mexico. So they have a
yes.
lot of that weird stuff down over there.
It's called enclave. That's the term.
Yeah. And for me is also, I think, that is a little bit concerning in a sense. We seem to be developing the old Cold War kind of alliancing. That Mariposa from South Africa was visiting the White House on the weekend. I think I saw it, or on Friday or something like that. And the U.S. was asking them how, the African countries' leaders should be condemning the Russian for the war, and because most African countries have been resistant in terms of criticizing the Soviet, and have that nostalgia from the long era. So even Japan, I think we were looking at. I think Cheryl, even you shared it with me during the Africa Tech Newsroom, that even Japan is increasing its assistance to Africa through aid or even entrepreneurship and things like that, and make it even clear that they really wanted to counter the China presence in Africa. So to me, it's like really you can clearly see it that the West versus the East kind of almost the Cold War era kind of alliance forging, it seems to be progressing quite a bit.
Yeah, you make a good point, but I think the West still needs to make up their mind because in the beginning of the Ukrainian thing, it was like, well, we don't give a shit if the Solomon Islands and some of these African countries and smaller countries vote a certain way on certain things. And then now they're all freaked out about it and tough on these guys. And you know, China's picking up the places that the West says they don't care about, and then the West runs to care about it. It's going to continue that way.
Hey,
Okay.
Tyler,
Yes, sir.
this is Ken. I have something that's non-tech. The only reason I bring it up is because it was on the All In podcast that,
I've
a
heard of
lot
it.
of people here,
Yeah,
you've heard about it, right?
I've heard of it.
So, yeah. So this was, this actually appeared in my TikTok because I mean their stuff is into TikTok now. So every time, even before I think it airs, because I think they tape before, it shows up in my TikTok very quickly. And so I actually think this is episode 95. This is actually not the very last one; it's the second to last one. Um, so and the reason I bring this up is because well, I'll tell you what it was. David Freeberg made a comment, and his comment was that he thinks in 30 years that none of the brands, whether he didn't specifically go into any brands, I won't mention any, but like the brands as we know them won't matter because of influencers.
Right, I
So
heard that.
every brand is going to be. So you've heard this thing, right? Did you hear that
I
one,
heard, I,
Tyler?
I skimmed through. It was like one of the more recent episodes, the most recent, or
Yes, the second
what?
to last one, right? It's the
Yeah,
second to last one,
yeah. I
right?
think it was second to last because I haven't really heard the most recent one that came out on Friday. And I
Yeah,
got, it was somewhere near the earlier part of the podcast, and he was making the comment about the Kim Kardashian and the influencers,
correct.
and how
Right.
how the power is going to be in their hands,
That is
essentially.
correct.
Right,
But
and
the
more.
reason specifically I'm bringing it up though
Yeah,
is he used an example, and he was factually, and this is factually, quantitatively incorrect about something that I know a lot about, and I just wanted to, for the benefit of everybody, if they listen to it, to correct something. He said he viewed the most consequential M&A transaction of this year so far as being Penn National Gaming buying Barstool Sports, which is in the online sports betting area.
right,
Um, and the reason why I can tell you this is quantitatively not correct, well, first of all, even the fact that the so-called acquisition actually just completed an acquisition. They actually bought 35% of Barstool back in 2020, and they've been using the Barstool brand for sports betting since then. So it's not new. So they've had 2.5 years with this, and online sports betting, for people who don't know, in the United States is relatively new. It's only really existed since 2018 as a result of a Supreme Court decision that legalized it. And even in 2018, there was only one state that had it, because it's still state by state. We don't have it in every state. It's not, every state has to decide to legalize it or not, roughly in half the states now. Um, he says, when he talks about the powers of brands, though, um, Barstool Sports, which is, for those who don't know what it is, it's a brand started by a guy named David Portnoy, who started doing like pizza testing videos. And and even though he's not, I would say he's probably a millennial, or somewhat older than a millennial, but it has a lot of appeal for younger men, which is the primary demographic for sports betting. um you know and the reason why this doesn't prove his point: Barstool Sports only has about a 2.5% market share. Okay, the two largest players in sports betting, with close to half the market, are DraftKings and FanDuel combined. FanDuel is owned by a company called Flutter, out of I think they're out of Ireland. They're both publicly traded. And then third would be BetMGM, which is a joint venture between MGM and another European company. Um, but it kind of, this idea that Barstool Sports is the David Portnoy is an influence. I mean, he was an influencer, there's no question. But the fact that you could just translate that to sports betting, and that this was, it's just, mathematically, when you look at their market share, wrong. Penn National, by the way, it's called Penn National because they started in Pennsylvania over 20 years ago, owning racetracks there. And then when the racetracks, like a lot of racetracks, started doing poorly, some states allowed the racetracks to have slot machines, and then they called them racinos. So they had a big a big what do you call it, head start in Pennsylvania, just to use an example. And even in Pennsylvania, they're way behind DraftKings and FanDuel. That, I mean, they're not even close. In fact, MGM is actually relatively close to them, and MGM doesn't even have a physical presence in the state. So I just wanted to kind of, correct the just try to correct the record on that a little bit. And I think that's all I had to say on that. But you
okay,
just can't necessarily. Oh yeah, the other thing related to tech, by the way, on this issue, when he says it's the most consequential acquisition of 2022, I'm thinking, wait a second, didn't Broadcom buy VMware? Wasn't that more consequential? Just in terms of size, and and the importance in industry in general than sports betting. I would think so. I would even tell you that uh, two real estate companies that kind of merged. Prologis buying Duke Realty was probably more important than Penn National buying the part of Barstool that they already didn't own, because that's important too. So anyway, I just wanted to like do that, and I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, but I love the point that he raises, though. Whether and I tend to agree with him, although my mind's open that the jury's out. But it's an interesting thought and an interesting dinner party debate point, which is what's more important. For example, from a tech perspective, people like MBHK, or what's the black YouTube guy who does brilliant tech reviews.
MK.
You were in the matrix there, Eric. Give it another try.
MKBHD.
MKBHD, thank you. Brilliant YouTuber, by the way, and really is doing the best tech reviews. He's really raised the bar, and he's so good that you tend to. I as an Apple, kind of I've been consistently Apple for a decade or plus, and he's clearly not totally sold necessarily. He seems truly unbiased, and I have to say, he could convince me to switch from Apple to something else, like the new Nothing phone, for example, or whatever, which he tends to like. But this is the point: which is more important, the brand or the influencer? And us as geeks here, we should. That's probably the best, easiest
The
example to look at.
The
Yeah,
product.
are we? Yes, in some cases we might say, I'm more loyal to the product. Okay, but what happens when you really start to resonate with an influencer, and that influencer has a different perspective, than you do about products? Well, guess what? They know more than you do, because I'm not trying all the Android phones. He is. And if I believe that he's unbiased, then that could be very powerful, especially with the Google. Is it the Pixel 7 that's coming out next week? If he says that it's better than the iPhone on multiple points, that could work for me. Because by the way, here, me being the world's smallest influencer, to the 400 people who watch Tech News, uh, I have an iPhone 12 Pro Max. When the iPhone 13 Pro Max came out, I went to the store, compared them side by side, and did my own little side by side comparison, and thought, it's not even worth, forget the price. It's not even worth the headache of switching to the device. It'd just be it'd take a day, and it would be a pain in the ass. So I didn't do it. I went to the store a few days ago, 3 days ago, because it just came out in Thailand, and they have a 14 Pro Max in my size, in my color, at my shop. And I was thinking, well, I'm probably going to upgrade because, reviewers seem to be saying great things.
But the camera is shaking, Tyler.
But I did a side-by-side comparison of my own testing, including the camera, rather detailed side-by-side. And again, it's not worth the hassle to me to upgrade to it. I don't care about, it's not a price issue whatsoever. Because I know I could give this phone to 100 different relatives at my 12 Pro Max, but it's just not worth the effort to sit there for an hour and buy the thing and the SIM and the da. It'll take a day, a half day at least. So I just said, no, screw it. I'm not going to do it. And I'm surprised that he didn't upgrade, because it didn't seem, based on my analysis, including the camera, to be totally substantial. So I was really surprised. I went in there thinking I was going to upgrade. Anyway, so now,
I
that?
agree with you, Tyler. Like the
Yeah.
13 Pro Max and the new one, there is nothing that I would spend a day of for just changing and switching. Prior to 13 Pro Max, I held on to 11 and skipped 12. But now from 13 to 14, it's not worth it, just for
Yeah.
somebody perhaps who needs this camera.
maybe an influencer, Instagram, or somebody who's planning to take a lot of pictures. And even that, my 13 Pro Max take very good pictures. So in my opinion, no.
Right.
So what if
Good.
I'm going from an 8? Where should I go to?
Oh yeah,
For
then
sure.
it's a
Then
huge
for sure.
difference.
But
Definitely.
this is the first time if I don't end up getting it, and I don't think I will, this will be the first time that I've skipped 2 years in not upgrading. So anyway,
Good for you. You are more
yeah.
echo
But
now.
I love
Either that or
when
you're getting old too.
I
You're
forgot
getting
the
more
air horn. Oh
analog.
my god!
Yeah.
Now I need to set a notification to ring the damn the air horn. That's truly a sign of aging. So here we go into the top story for today from The Verge. It says a GTA forums user uploads 90 gameplay videos of Rockstar's upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6, claiming they were behind last week's Uber hack and may leak Grand Theft Auto 5 and 6 source code. Rockstar confirms a network intrusion by an unauthorized third party leading to the Grand Theft Auto 6 leak, and development of the game will continue as planned. Who gives a shit? This is great. This is genius marketing, if ever there was any. Because I didn't know or care that Grand Theft Auto 6 was coming out, and now it's all anything Reddit or the tech blogs can talk about. So well
It
done.
embedded itself in its own universe. Grand Theft Auto. So it experienced some sort of grand theft itself. So that's kind of interesting.
Grand Theft marketing. So South Korean prosecutors ask Interpol to issue a red notice for Do Kwon and the government to revoke his passport. Oh, snap. They're not fooling around. Kwon denies being on the run. Fallen crypto developer denies he's on the run from investigators. South Korea prosecutors have asked Interpol to issue a red notice, which means he won't be able to check in anywhere. Well, no, he can go wherever the hell he wants. What will happen though is any immigration desk in the world that he appears at will then know that he's there and will alert. They'll ask him to step into a side room while the authorities come and
And his
extradite him.
passport is revoked.
Well, let's see where he tries to go, or where has he revealed where he is now?
Did you see his Twitter? He actually have a tweet, but he only allow people he allowed to reply. So if you click on the right button, you'll see his own tweet.
But this is the same guy that I said he should do my old idea of running and have an award
Yes.
to catch him, right? And he could be
Yes.
Instagramming each day little video clips, or every few hours.
Catch me if you can.
Catch me if you can. Exactly. I called it the big chase when I did it, and there was a $10,000 reward. He could do it too. And it's, my God, is it so easy to do something like that right now with all of the social media tools. But the problem is you have these people on geoguessr.com who, from a photo of a highway in the middle of Moldova, could pinpoint the location within 5 meters. I'm not joking. Have you seen these videos of people playing GeoGuessr competitions on YouTube? Oh my God, are these people incredible. For those who don't know, there's a game called GeoGuessr where it's basically like Google Maps Street View mode, where you're dropped into a street view mode of some place on the planet, very randomly, like really, really, really randomly, and you have to guess where you are. And but
It's
they're
like
all.
Could he be in the open sea now on his super yacht?
Then that would be harder. That would be very challenging indeed. But the people who are addicted to GeoGuessr, the very best 10 GeoGuessr players, because there's a point system and there's tournaments and whatever, and you can watch these tournaments online of the best guys and gals playing each other. Oh my God, are these people wickedly studious in knowing. It's truly mind-bending how accurate most of them can be on, again, throw a dart at a map, go into Google Street View mode, try and figure out where you are without moving or even tilting the camera. It's just a photo at this point. And they can guess it within 5 meters. Within 5 meters. Within 5 meters. Anywhere on the planet. It's unbelievable. So if the problem is, back when I did the big chase, I didn't think people would be able to guess where I was. I now know that the GeoGuessr experts would know within 5 meters where you are at any time, regardless if it's the most
All they
barren.
need is a single picture.
I know. You've seen these videos, Chris?
No, it's nuts. You can actually watch them online. People strongly recommend people look them up. It's they'll literally take a single photo, like something you just see from Instagram or something you just randomly grab off of like some random picture, some stock photo or something, and they can nail from looking at like the license plates to look at like the time of day and the way the sun is in a certain position. They'll look at the
Yes.
mountain range, and
Yes.
they'll just take that thing down into where, and then they pinpoint on a map and they match it exactly with like a Google Street View. It's like holy crap!
And
The
the,
best
the
ones
best
can do it in minutes.
the best one can do it damn near lickety split. Like
Yeah.
it's
That,
scary.
that's
Well,
that's also used in the those Uyghurs counts. That's how they
Ooh.
pinpoint the location and to confirm it as a real photo instead of a fake one.
I
Ah,
I
wonder
yeah.
if
don't
there's a
understand
way to.
why you are so impressed, Tyler, because it's just like to me the analogy is identifying histology patches from your body, from entire body, which is like millions and millions of different slides. And in the histology lab, you had to guess them under 5 seconds, or anatomy lab, you had to guess them under 5 seconds. 10 of them, hundreds of them consecutively to pass your test. So when you spend time on recognizing stuff on micro level or macro level, and the strategies, which is associated surroundings, coloring, different techniques, it's just like the same way of learning, whether it's maps or it's like a histopathological microscopic sample that you have to go through, and the identification is only based on your knowledge of the entire, like in this case a geographical, like maybe identifying structures or patches or paths. For us it was like again, shapes and surrounding structure references, although many samples look exactly the same, but if you know what you're looking for, you can find and differentiate. So not very hard to do.
One quick point just to point out before turning it back over to Tyler. If there's signal in there and you've got a good training data set to work with, or the geographic things, so the geoguessers come out. BB actually just linked a website which is amazing for this sort of thing. But those kind of training data sets exist. Theoretically, you could train an AI to do this, because if the
Yeah.
humans are picking up the patterns, an AI could too, which would be nuts, because you could just take a picture anywhere on the planet, throw the ad, and it's like, oh yeah, that's obviously like this one random island in Sicily, and oh, that's obviously essentially somewhere in the backwoods of Montana. Just being able to have that as just a guess, purely just off of the geographic things that are in the background, nothing with the GPS data, just from the imagery. I mean, that's something very doable, it seems. So
Yeah.
that's
I
spectacular.
agree. Yeah, you're
Use it
exactly
to
right.
disseminate fake news too. So if there's a photo that's been doctored, these kind of systems could be trained then to distinguish between authentic versus generated or simulated images. I think that
Maybe,
was
but the thing is,
challenged by the DoD.
the same things that discriminate and being able to detect things can also be used to generate them. It's never a one way a function. It's two way. But
Oh yeah,
either way, it's
but
going
like
to
the
result in
light thing
surpassing
that you mentioned.
capabilities.
You mentioned the light thing. So for example, if the photo has the sunlight going the wrong direction or the shadows don't match, that's kind of what the I think the DARPA project was about. So
Well, that's the public version of it. The thing is, a lot of people don't realize that you can turn those same algorithms and reverse them, and so they can actually generate more authentic fakes that match those sorts of details. It's one of those things where it's more of an arms race scenario, where when you have a general case algorithm that's able to do these things, it typically works the other direction as well. Detectors work as really well as generators, and vice versa. Sorry, Tyler. It's a fascinating topic with things. Keep going on that. That was really cool.
Okay, here we go. Now back to 1 second here. How do I get back to that? There it is. Okay, so the next big story. So Do Kwon's on the run, and South Korea is getting Interpol involved. So could be a fun game show of the future. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if I mentioned how Matt Damon and Ben Affleck ripped off my idea and tried to sell it to Fox. They called it The Runner, and it never ended up happening because I contacted them and said I own the intellectual property for that. So anyway, I might end up doing that at some point. Anyway, the next one is that iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max owners say that the camera physically shakes when taking photos or video in third-party apps such as TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram. Okay, I'm sure they'll fix that in software. The next is from the Washington Post. They say they have sources that the Pentagon plans to audit how it conducts online clandestine information warfare after those are great. That's a great phrase. Um, Clandestine information warfare. Ooh, I
After they
just
find how many groups are saying pro-Ukraine, anti-Ukraine, everything, and then going, wait, which groups interfere with other groups? If you ever look up essentially the U.S. Information Agency, they have 10,000 people whose sole job is just to advance America's overseas interest, essentially, because they're supposed to do this without targeting domestic. The thing is that if they target overseas and then it gets picked up by domestic, well, magically, essentially, that's no longer an issue. That for 10,000 for reference for how large that is, like the next like there's what, 4 or 8 I think it was of the largest PR agencies combined. Like the amount of information warfare components the military is able to exercise is absolutely astounding. And because many of them have been leveraged on their social positioning to be in key places at newspapers, broadcast journalists, bloggers, etc., but they're positioned in places that they're guaranteed to be picked up by friendly interests, it means that they have way more visibility than just like some random dude in the chat room. And the cumulative effect of that is somewhat astounding for shaping in public opinion. The funny part is they've done so much of this, it can be hard to keep track of which one's where. If you ever want to have some fun with it, whenever you see essentially something in the news on, especially around Ukraine stuff, try tracing the sources of where essentially the photographs come from, and then look at essentially which organizations and who the board was. And yeah, you can do it on a line of this, but often you can find sources and trace them back. I found a few versions would go back to the American one, but there are other versions you can trace back to other countries. It's kind of fun playing that game. But yeah, I'm sure the Pentagon would love to have an accounting of this.
Hey, Tyler, Ben Affleck actually did a film back in 2013 called Runner Runner. Is that what you're talking about?
oh, not at all. It was called The Runner. They made a production company called Pearl Street Productions to produce it, and they just opened their office, ironically, a few blocks away from where I was set up at the time, and then they literally aborted mission, and Ben went into rehab.
But what was the film going to be about, though?
No, it
You
wasn't
had a
a film.
treatment or something, right?
It was a TV show, a reality TV show, where contestants would go into hiding, and people would try and find them.
Oh, okay. So this is a little bit different. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. So they branded it as an action interactive, thing. Anyway,
It's like,
so
where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
yeah,
That's kind of what
it's
it reminds
exactly
me.
Where's Waldo?
it's both of those exactly, but yeah, but on the web. So the next is from the New York Times. Oh no, we kind of skipped the last one about the Pentagon plans to audit how it conducts online clandestine information warfare after Meta and Twitter and others removed pro-U.S. operations, meaning the U.S. does what China and every big country does, which is, monkey around with social media, posting things and following people, and having a gay old time. And uh, some of the content or the accounts are getting removed by Facebook and Twitter, and so now they're auditing. They're going to rethink how they do it. That's all. So, the next is from the New York Times: how Russia's IRA troll factories. Well, geez, what a coincidence! We go right from the Washington Post talking about the Pentagon's troll farms to the New York Times story about Russian troll farms.
They're
Russia's
totally different.
Russia's troll factories tweeted a torrent of fabricated narratives against the U.S. Women's March and its leaders for 18 months, fracturing the movement. As American feminists came together in 2017 to protest Donald Trump, Russia's disinformation machine set about deepening the divides among them. There you go. What an interesting coincidence. Those two came back to back.
Russia doesn't like pink cats. They want
The
furry ones.
next up, the UK's financial
Yeah, but
conduct.
Tyler, hold. If you take a look at that article, I mean, for people, I mean, I kind of know it, but if you take a look at that article that you posted on the Women's March, there were legitimate divisions among
Sure.
of women in that situation that Russia didn't. I mean, Russia may have tried to fan the flames, but those flames were already there. So
Sure.
I mean,
But
But
of
I mean,
course, comrade.
we've been around this long enough where if there's any amount of people unhappy with each other, when a large enough group that's there, if you fan and amplify something, it will have an effect. When you're working across, a million people, even small amounts of influences, the fact that you can do it across a large number all at once with enough state-based resources, you can do that for any movement. You can amplify, you can diminish, or you can put something more in prominence or put it more in the background. It's just a matter of who's going to put more time into and more resource than someone else. It's more of more of an example of state-based policy and what they were intending to do that's more important than the actual effect.
It's also very asymmetric because the dollars that you spend on misinformation or these kind of infection campaigns, it costs a lot more to repair those divides. So even though there may have been divides to begin with, I think they become very much exaggerated and amplified. And in fact, that's one of those exercises from back in Putin's day, which was, hey, you know how Google had that percent of your time you're going to spend doing crazy projects? Well, KGB agents had assignments like, hey, just come up with crazy misinformation, disinformation campaigns in your free time and just submit them.
I
So
love the idea of 20% free time for spies. That could be some great, it's also some crazy stuff.
exactly. So that's the kind of I guess information war we're dealing with. I think unfortunately a lot of people don't know how far that rabbit hole goes, and I would point people to Sam Harris's podcast on the topic, where he met with the researcher who covered the entire. I guess the Russian misinformation campaigns. They'd have black people on one street, on one side of the street, white supremacists on the other side of the street, both scheduled Facebook groups meeting the same day. So that's the kind of threats we're having to combat. So I think we just have to remember we have more in common than that which divides us.
So
There's the
you're
clumsy
all
version of
you're
this where
all
it's just a random tweet that doesn't get picked up as a thing, but the more advanced ones you can reach, tens of millions of impressions with things on a regular basis. And it whether or not people see it is relevant. It's more important of whether or not it actually drives action. And that's the part that's really interesting for an influence operation because you can spend months, preparing some of these things. The best ones we don't actually find out about. The ones that we actually hear about typically are the ones where they screwed up, which, that's the ones that are less competent. But what's impressive as you can see is an evolution of these tactics as they get more and more advanced to the idea where a leader can say, I want riots in X country or in X city to time roughly when I'm talking to so and so leader. That sort of influence can be very valuable to have, but it takes a while to set those things up. We're going to see kind of like the evolution of that.
Well,
well,
isn't it? Sorry.
technology has allowed it to go faster. Ken, you're right. Legitimate disagreements. It's just the fire fanned. It's a lot cheaper to do it now. It's always been done. I mean, we're talking Russians now. Everybody does it. Everybody's been doing it. Other countries just couldn't afford to do it the way certain ones were doing it when they used to could print flyers and hire goons. Now you can influence goons just by going to certain groups and getting them heightened. I mean, there's plenty of declassified things you can read on that where certain groups are set up to meet at the same place. I think Eric, you were talking about, and they probably didn't really mean to be there, but it's pretty easy to influence it outside of the country. So technology is good for a number of things, but it's very easy to pit existing hate against hate.
right. Don't
Existing or cultivated, right? I mean, the big lie. Now we're kind of in phase two of all this, I would think, because the sheer power of the big lie and it's kind of downstream effects with regards to taking over Secretary of State offices. We're going to kind of see everything's kind of on the line, I believe, is what they're saying for this election cycle. But I mean, it's kind of at this point, how can technology remedy the whatever got out of the bag, right? Like we were dealing with the fracturing of democracy based on an extremely effective use of that kind of approach. So
David, don't you think some people out there, when I say people, it could be domestic or international, enjoy how tech is challenging democracy and free speech, where democracy now has to rethink some of the things that it believes in just to save itself.
Well, I actually think so. Tech has run amok and run wild. So I actually think, I mean, we get these kind of conversations all the time where the legislation of tech services has just been non-existent, right? So it's kind of always playing catch up, and those that fall on the innovation, to hell with everything other outside of innovation. They always talk about how it'll never catch up, and that's just all that's it's a by choice to some degree with regards to Washington. But no, I think that this is all criminal activity that just has not been kind of resolved, right? So I free speech. I think it's helpful to really have a more thoughtful conversation about free speech because there's no such thing as free speech, in my opinion. I think that you have to slice and dice how speech is used, and we've already legislated certain types of speech, and we just aren't legislating the today's modern day what do I call it the city square or something like that appropriately yet, right? So Fox News and different media outlets are just they run amok, and the power of the psychology. We'd have to get somebody up here who really understands all these different aspects of psychological science to see just how powerful that is. And when you have a complete I won't say controls of responsibility of
Guardrails.
people. Yeah. Anyways, I'll close my mic at this point, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there because it's just this idea that technology can solve everything. It's just a totally double-edged sword. It just as the AI as AI has come out of the box, right? We've got a whole other sword out there that's going to have a bunch of really bad effects in different specific places.
Okay, moving along here. Next up is that the UK's Financial Conduct Authority warns consumers against FTX, saying the exchange is not authorized, following a similar warning about Binance in 2021. They say the group led by Sam Bankman-Fried is "quote unquote" targeting consumers without authorization. Oh boy. Next up, an
Well,
FCC
that's an interesting story. I have to look at it because for those who don't know, I think it was just last week, FTX bought I think 30% interest in Anthony Scaramucci's company called Skybridge. So Skybridge, which is basically a hedge fund allocator, and I was thinking of actually having Anthony, if he was willing to do it, come on Clubhouse. He was a guest on my radio show twice when I used to have a radio show. But he got himself into crypto probably close to the peak of Bitcoin, close to when Bitcoin was like around 50,000, and it's not just Bitcoin. They've actually I think he suspended redemptions in one of his funds that had a lot of crypto in it. So it's interesting that there's a new FTX story because I think that now will impact a little bit Skybridge because they just did this last week because Skybridge has one of its big SALT conferences, which for those who don't know, like Tyler has all his conferences. SALT is a very big hedge fund conference. It used to be always in Vegas. They've moved it to New York believe it or not, since the pandemic to show strength with New York because Anthony's from New York. But they also do one in Singapore, and there's supposed to be one next year with Sam. And then this was scheduled even before they made the acquisition, the investment. They're going to do one in the Bahamas sometime in next year. So anyway, okay, I'm done.
Okay, so the next one is the FCC and an FCC filing and a B&H product page detailed the upcoming Google Nest Wi-Fi Pro router expected at the October 6th Google event where they'll have the new Pixel phone and Pixel Buds and whatever, maybe, and the watch. So it's going to be a near clone of the recent Apple event, where they'll have the new phone, the new earbuds, and the new watch, but also the new Wi-Fi, Google Nest Wi-Fi Pro, which will be using 6E Wi-Fi standard to improve speeds, etc., yada yada. And no doubt it will have a Google Assistant built right into it, as every new Google device will. New York Times. Sources detail Apple's dilemma over releasing Emancipation, the $120 million Civil War drama starring the slapper, Will Smith, that wrapped earlier in 2022. And of course, the dilemma is, should they release it or not, considering Will the slapper, Smith, is now a social pariah. Now Apple faces a quandary on what to do with the movie. What would you do if you were Apple, having spent 120 million, aka your lunch money, on?
Let the market decide. Let the market decide.
Well, I thought the Will Smith slap had more fallout against his wife than him. I think the metadata showed that to some extent. So I wouldn't dismiss fans of Will Smith. I think everyone understood that it was perhaps a pandemic, and each of us probably lost our shit more than one occasion. So I think people are somewhat more forgiving of Will Smith than perhaps other folks. But I think the market. It'll be interesting to see if the market agrees with that.
I say let the market decide. I still think he's an ass, but in situations like these, let the market decide.
Yeah, and the movie has its, plenty of other people involved in the movie. It seems like it's a shame that it shouldn't get released. Anyway.
I think they should release it, but I think Chris Rock should have a quick cameo at the beginning of the movie to say his piece at the start of the movie.
Is
I
this is
wouldn't be
this
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris got
I just wanted to
a
make sure
percentage
which
of
film we're
that.
talking about. Is this Emancipation, the one that Apple's making?
Yes,
They're not releasing it now.
they're debating because they spent 120 million, and yet I guess Apple wants is like Disney. They're kind of careful of their image, and what does it say if they promote a film of somebody who committed assault on live TV, whatever. But
Uh,
if Chris Rock gets to have a special cameo at the start, if he gets 10 seconds to say whatever he wants, then I say go release it.
there's another reason to release that film. It's an important historical story. It's actually based on a true story, and it would be very, very sad if that film was not released over this reason. I mean, there are a lot of casualties there.
What is the story about? I have no idea what it's about. Somebody can
It's a story about a runaway slave that joins the Union Army, and this is was the only reason I'm a little familiar with my brother. Full disclosure, my brother is an entertainment lawyer, represented the person who wrote the film. He only wrote the script. I mean, there was a book or something that was written that they got, or whatever, it was based on a real story, and they got the rights to it. And then they made this film. But it's based on a real a real story that somebody about like I just said, a runaway slave who joined the Union Army. And I don't know, and like I don't have any other knowledge of it other than that. I just remember when it got done, when the deal got done, it was at virtual cons because we were in the middle of the pandemic, and it was like the most expensive film that got purchased at the virtual cons festival.
You know,
So they have
I
a
got
lot of.
hang on. I figured it out.
Yeah.
Release the movie, nominate him for the Academy Award.
Don't
He
let him
wins the
win.
award, but Chris Rock is the one who has to give him the award. And
No, he has to
then
come
it's
out and slap him.
round
Well,
round two.
he's ineligible for the Academy for the
10 years,
Academy
right?
Award, so it doesn't matter whether that doesn't matter. But by
The
the way,
Yeah.
Golden Globe, whatever. The
there's other people who have stakes in this besides Will Smith, and everybody else gets screwed. Okay, if they don't release this film, okay, it's not fair to everybody else who worked on this film. Okay, it just isn't.
I mean, what is Apple concerned about releasing the film? I mean, what
No,
what 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 what
I
else
think
can go more wrong?
I figured it out. I figured it out. Chris Rock should be here. Here's how I honestly think this could actually all be put to bed in an ideal way. And tell me if I'm insane. But hear me out first. Of course, I'm crazy. I know what the answer is, but just if if Chris Rock, who when he was slapped, could have being a very quick-witted, hilarious comedian, and he's brilliant at the gift of improvised comedy, could have on stage at the Academy Awards really kind of buried Chris Rock, Will Smith with humor in a way that just would have been brutal, right? Okay, he could have done that, and he didn't do that. Okay, and that's why people applauded him for not doing that. However, I think if Will Smith is sincerely sorry, as he says he is, then I think the right thing to do would be to give Chris Rock the opportunity to do his Netflix special, HBO special, whatever it is comedians are doing these days. And he gets up on stage and he has a whole section that he's crafted over the last year about Will Smith, and have Will Smith stand next to him or in the front row and have to take it with the cameras on him. Oh, I think even ideally on stage with him, and have to take everything that Chris Rock can possibly throw at him.
Like that awkward
And
Mike Myers and Kanye West video where he's like,
but
George
what
Bush.
it would just make it even funnier knowing that he has to take it. You see what I'm saying? And he will have to take it. What's he going to do? Slap him twice? No, he can't. And that's what's
Yeah,
going to make
strap him down in a Hannibal Lecter outfit.
yes. But even better, you don't even strap him down. You just have him stand there, and he has to take it, and just let Chris Rock go full force on him for 10 minutes. I think that would be a huge win-win for everybody. I think it would the humor that Chris could put into that would make Chris look hilarious. I think it would show that Will can take a joke, which is desperately needed at this point for Will's own PR image, and everyone wins. It's monetized. Chris gets the money. They could
Yeah,
donate
but
it
it's
to charity if they
fabricated.
want.
It's not
Yeah,
natural.
that's fine. Of course it's fabricated, but it's Hollywood. It's two Hollywood superstars, whatever. But I think this is how you could put the whole thing to rest.
But
Apple's got
Chris,
so much cash, they could just make sure Will Smith gets compensated some other way and garnish, indenture his wage and give it to Chris Rock. There's money that should be the penalty in this problem because,
Legally,
like,
you can't do that. By the way, I mean, there's just too much emphasis on what happened at the Academy Awards on this. First of all, the Academy Awards, like every award show, is actually has declining ratings. Before this story came out, just a day or two ago, there was a story about how the producers of the Academy Awards are trying to figure out new ways to make it more relevant and completely change the way that they do everything. So I mean, there's a lot more to the motion picture industry than the Academy Awards. That, quite frankly, I think with in the age of streaming, matter less and less, because if you think of what gets nominated, not every. I mean, we think everybody has Netflix. They don't. And then we have things that come out on Apple. And in fact, the first streamer to ever win an Academy Award was Apple. I think for Coda was like last year or something, right? I mean, Apple, or it was there was an Academy, right? Not an Emmy, but Apple TV has a much lower market share, obviously, as a streamer than Netflix, and even less than HBO. Not everyone has Apple TV, so we don't have the what's the word I'm looking for? But we don't have this collective viewing of films that we did when everything was in the theaters, where everybody can go to a theater. Because if you don't have this particular streaming platform, you don't even get to see the film. So the Academy Awards and the Emmy Awards, quite frankly, too, similarly, okay, are simply less relevant than they were 20 or 30 years ago,
Good point.
and we should. And so I think we spend
Ken,
too much time talking about it. Yeah.
Ken is definitely onto something. I personally think that entire debacle was fabricated just to raise rating because any kind of controversy is, good. we have talked about Academy Awards or Emmy Awards more after this thing. Otherwise, nobody was even paying attention. To me personally, I think this was all fabricated. That's why there were no grave consequences. And even now, talking about this is kind of highlighting Apple's film. So another negative form of publicity stunt, perhaps. And your plan is brilliant,
Exactly.
Tyler, but still it's going to be, again, more publicity for
Yeah,
them. I
yeah, but
personally think Chris's face should be, superimposed on Will's face in the entire movie just for fun.
okay. Next up from MIT Tech Review, artists say they risk losing income as people, meaning internet users, are using artists' names as distinctive style prompts in text to image AI art generators like Dolly 2 for commercial purposes. This is a brilliant point. If you and it's more than meets the eye because the artist owns the right to their own name and their own likeness, right? And yet, if you want to make a Dolly 2 on that's based on, oh, I don't know, yeah, Frida Kahlo or Andy Warhol. Let's pick a more somewhat modern reference that people are familiar with. Um, then you can have an Andy Warhol like whatever you want. Make a building. What would a building look like if Andy Warhol designed a building? And it will give you 10, 20 fantastic, surprisingly good examples of that. Or you could say Frida Kahlo. Give me what would a Frida Kahlo building look like, or what would pick any artist you like. So artists are indeed their style has been aped, hijacked by these AIs. Is there a and yet you can't make that Andy Warhol style building or shoes or gown, wedding gown, without mentioning Andy Warhol, because that's the words that trigger the machine to know to do the stylings of that artist. So, yes, isn't there some kind of action that artists might be able to prove?
Tyler, it's not their name
Unfair?
and likeness that you're going for. You're just going for their style. So you can, in the style of
I
Picasso,
know, I get that,
style of Andy
but you
Warhol.
have to
So it would have
use
to be
their
close
name
enough.
in the creation of the likeness.
Yeah, but you can reference somebody. So I can say,
How
I
can
can
you
do that.
without naming them?
You can name them. That's not. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem with this is fascinating. I think this is fascinating that artists say it's already encroaching on their style because they're clearly naming current artists that are alive that are still producing and putting out things. And Dolly is, those things are highly accurate. I mean, they're very interesting. So, but what it's doing is you would have to say that you have such a distinctive style that somehow you own that, and anything newly created in that style.
Right.
And what it's doing is it's pulling from all over the internet, as we talked about before in this room. It's pulling images from all over that would have been like Picasso images, and images, say you want a flying turtle in the style of Picasso, it's going to be pulling those types of images. So what it's doing though is it's using the Picasso images potentially, depends on where it's getting them and what it's pulling, but potentially in violation of license rights.
Okay. So
So
let's take it
So the
one step
style
further then.
patent that we need.
So watch this. Watch what happens. So in the near future, and it's already in the embryonic stages of audio generation, song generation in the styles of. And OpenAI already has this. You can go to their SoundCloud account and listen to songs that sound like Johnny Cash, by the way, or Bob Marley, or Bob Dylan. And what happens when I say, hey, do a duet between Bob Dylan and Bob Marley? And it makes it, and it sounds just like them. Guess what? You're going to lose that suit because those families are going to sue your ass and they're going to win. Then what? Is my mic still on?
crickets,
Yes,
crickets.
it just
Yes.
astonished us.
Yes, but this is coming. And so why is the music example so different from the image example?
Well, that's good. That's a really good point. But that's kind of the challenge with, again, this rise of AI, and just how it's just completely kind of uncorralled. I think that you're going to get suits are kind of funny though, right? A lot of them don't go anywhere. Most of them don't go anywhere. But hopefully there will be some kind of a landmark copyright suit that kind of helps rationalize some of this. You remember the what was that, the 2000 Millennium Act, when Madonna sued, right? That was one of the early ones. But what do you think, Tyler? What are your thoughts with regards to this? What is the fair? How will the fair use kind of unfold? A lot of what they call it, electronic music or whatever. I mean, a lot of that I think was kind of similar. Maybe I may be misspeaking. You're the music expert.
I didn't quite digest your point there about
No,
EDM.
just well, take out the EDM stuff. But just, what are your thoughts about, fast forward 3 years when it's a push button away to get what you're talking about from an AI assisted creative work? What are your thoughts about how it's going to unfold with regards to
I don't know.
copyrights?
The courts are going to set the precedents of what's acceptable and not acceptable, and how we will proceed forward. I'm curious to see how it plays out, because there's plausible deniability. You could say, "Oh no, I just said reggae mixed with folk," and it just happens to sound like Bob Dylan and Bob Marley doing a duet. I said, "What does a reggae folk song sound like?" And it sounds exactly like Bob Dylan and Bob Marley singing a reggae folk song together.
And what
I
about
get can
cover bands? Cover bands cover it live, right? I mean, they're allowed to.
you,
So
yeah, and
how?
yeah. Well, then now you're going to get into if you want to turn this into the legalities of mechanicals. What happens is the person who records the record, anyone can do. By the way, you don't have to get permission of any artist to do a cover of their music. In fact, you could ask for permission. They could say no, and you can still go ahead and do it legally. And this happens all the time. Movies and TV shows do this all the time, where they asked for permission from the Rolling Stones to use something, and the Rolling Stones are like, "No, go fuck yourself." And they're like, "Okay, we're just going to hire some cheesy band to go in the studio and re-record it, and it's a cover." But the Rolling Stones get a piece of that cover, so in a way, they don't really mind that you do it because they're going to get a cut anyways. But they don't want the original being used.
And if the copy band is really, really, really good, right?
Yeah. Oh, they
Like
do
the
this in Thailand all the time. Thailand radio stations and album sales are very often incredibly similar re-recordings of popular songs. Taylor Swift, a lot of top pop in America gets re-recorded by artists that sound. I, it's different, but boy, do they get very, very close. They hire singers that sound a lot like the original artist. They record it with the audio settings are incredibly similar to. If you have to listen kind of closely, to be like, hey, wait a minute, that's not the original recording or version. This singer is a little different. This is a thing in other parts of the world that don't want to pay uh, the full for the full authentic original release, but musical artists, still get paid for recordings of their songs, re-recordings of their songs, and even performances. Even a cover band playing somewhere will have to pay. There's agencies, ASCAP and BMI and others, who go around collecting performances of recordings or live performances of songs for those artists. So if someone is playing a David Bowie cover in a bar, if if that bar is registered with ASCAP and BMI and the other collection agencies, David Bowie will get his estate will get a piece of that performance.
So in the modern day use of the video expression of that, and with the like Google, just as an example, not a startup because it's just their capital resources. So if modern day video artists wanted to use Sylvester Stallone and recast his likeness using
Okay.
graphic technology
Thank you.
in a
Thank you.
role, is
Perfect.
is that a
Perfect.
solution where we just can't
Right.
where
Because I could say, make me, back to Jennifer's example, make me a Picasso portrait of Sylvester Stallone. Which, by the way, somebody please do that because that would be very funny. But um, if it's a still image, I think she's right. I don't. No one can do anything. But if as soon as it's a movie, and I say, hey, which 10 years from now, when Dolly can generate actual movies, short 10-minute TikTok movies, more than a 10-second clip, like a 10-minute movie. Say, hey, make me a movie of Sylvester Stallone and make it look like it's a Scorsese film, and put Sylvester Stallone as the main character, and he's a degenerate drunk boxer who loses to some Russian guy, and make that for me, and the AI will make that. Now what happens? That somebody made a movie, and it appears to be Sylvester Stallone as the actor, and it appears to be have the stylings of Martin Scorsese directing. I don't think that's intellectual protectable. The
Well,
style,
Tyler, you know, we
why?
do
But
Tyler. I'd be very careful about commenting on intellectual stuff, intellectual property on entertainment law, because it's really, really complicated. We do whole rooms on in a room that we used to have going here. I don't know if they're going to do any more because it was kind of a pandemic induced room. But the guy named David Weiner, who was an entertainment lawyer, used to be the I mean, now he's the associate general counsel for HarperCollins. He and another attorney named Mitra Horian, who she just got a lot of publicity during the covering the Johnny Depp trial. We spent a lot of time talking about these issues. They're very complicated. People have a right to their likeness. The fact that you can create it with AI doesn't necessarily negate some of their legal rights. So I wouldn't go out and on a limb
right,
and say anything about this issue if I were you, because I think I think it's incredibly complicated, and it's not and often not clear
It
about it.
arises in writing too, Ken, because there now is a company called Writer, which just got $25 million to create, content marketing and all kinds of other writing. And
Right, but Dr. Let me go on Ken's thing really quickly. As Ken said, so and I think Tyler, you alluded to part of this. It's an entertainment area. They've fleshed out a lot of stuff around the film and music. And I'm not an entertainment lawyer, but I am a gaming lawyer, so I do know a lot about content and sound. And the sound one where you talked about doing the cover, that's statutory. So that's an example of a statutory right that you can get those licenses. We grant them all the time to do the cover stuff. So as you say, so that's not, which is different than the like again, as you said, the if you want to portray Sylvester Stallone in a Scorsese style movie, you've got a bunch of different issues going on there. But the likeness of Stallone would not be permitted. The Scorsese style goes back to is Dolly generating it in Picasso or whatever style. I would say you don't have rights there,
yeah,
but
I
again,
agree.
we'll have to flesh this out. But again, and as you said, it's layered. It's super layered, and this stuff is moving so fast. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I think you know.
Yeah.
what about Faulkner and Hemingway and, writing?
Yeah, yeah, but Dr. Francine, again, is it theirs? Do they own that tone of voice? I mean, do they own that style? Is that so unique that anything else created? So back to the example Tyler gave of the reggae. If you did a Bob Marley meets Johnny Cash reggae song, you're using their vocal likeness, would be my impression, and that would not be permitted. It's not that which is different than using, say, again, my flying turtles in the style of Picasso, which would I'd say not be protected.
Yeah, that's why.
So writing can no longer be copyright and it
All I
cannot
can
be
say is,
No,
hey,
it is
yo,
copyright,
Paulie.
but copyright applies, Dr. Francine, the exact what you wrote. Gone with the Wind is the
Sorry.
exact Gone with the Wind that you wrote, or the code that you wrote. Copyright is exactly that embodiment of it. It's not the style; it's the exact words.
Okay.
Sorry, it sounds like a
And
design
lastly, by the
patent.
way, I'm going to send this back channel to Cheryl. You can pin it. There is a major Supreme Court case coming up over intellectual property, and I'll let everybody read it for themselves. But I mentioned it only because Tyler brought up Andy Warhol, and it does involve the works of Andy Warhol, and it's going to the United States Supreme Court. So I'm going to send her this back channel.
Okay. So then I just love this topic. That the point is the of the articles that artists are already saying they're losing income due to people using the artist's name when they try to make new generate works in their stylings, and so they're losing money because you don't need to go hire some artist or go buy a painting or a lithograph of, you know, they're claiming they're losing money already as a result of this. I'd be curious to know which artists are claiming they're losing money, by the way. So the article says Rutkowski is a Polish digital artist who uses classical painting styles to create dreamy fantasy landscapes. He's made illustrations for games such as Sony and Magic the Gathering, and he's become a sudden hit in the new world of text-to-image AI generation. His distinctive style is now one of the most commonly used prompts in the new open source AI generator Stable Diffusion, which has launched late last month. The tool, along with other popular image generation AI models, allows anyone to create impressive images based on text prompts. For example, type in "wizard with a sword and a glowing orb of magic fire fights a fierce dragon, Greg Rutkowski," and the system will produce something that looks not a million miles away from works in Rutkowski's style. But these open source programs are built by scraping images from the internet, often without permission and poorly attributed to artists. As a result, they are raising tricky questions about ethics and copyrights, and artists like Rutkowski have had enough. According to a website called Lexica, which tracks over 10 million images and prompts generated by Stable Diffusion, Rutkowski's name has been used as a prompt around 93,000 times. Some of the world's most famous artists, such as Michelangelo, Picasso, Da Vinci, brought up around 2,000 prompts or less. Rutkowski's name also featured as prompts thousands of times in the Discord of other text-to-image creators. Rutkowski was initially surprised, but thought it might be a good way to reach new audiences. Then he tried searching for his name to see if a piece he had worked on had been published. The online search brought back work that had his name attached to it that wasn't his. Quote, "It's been just a month. Uh, I probably wouldn't be able to find my work out there because the internet is flooded with AI art. That's concerning," he says.
So this is about attribution, not necessarily that they're using the style of. This is actually saying it's his.
Well, right. Yeah, there's an interesting twist there. Yeah, they're saying like in the stylings of, but his because of the way the search engines work, his name is now being filled. The internet's being filled with images that aren't his that look like his.
So in the intellectual property area, the key word, and this is why I had Cheryl pin this article from the Supreme Court case coming up. Your ability to have what's called fair use of other people's intellectual property without compensating them
Right.
and the definition of fair use. One of the key words, is it transformative in art, and is it distinctive enough from the original? Are you using it differently than the original? And that's obviously in the eye of the beholder, and that's what this case involving some of Warhol's work gets into. And there hasn't been a major Supreme Court case on this issue in in many years. There actually was an interesting case, and only because it's like so early in the morning here, like my mind is taxed. But there was a case involving Java, Tyler, the use of Java, and I'm gonna go back and get it now. The Java
It was
language,
Sun and Oracle, I think.
I thought it was
right?
Oracle. Yeah, Oracle and Google also had a Java thing as well.
Right. Yeah, there was a whole litigation about that. Yeah, and apparently, I was
Well,
surprised, but
that's the
apparently,
foundation of
uh,
Android.
uh,
Steve
uh, uh,
Jobs versus Google, and then Steve passed the torch over to Larry Ellison, and Larry, being Steve's best friend, decided Steve committed to and told Google, specifically, what was Google's CEO at the time, Dr. Francine Eric Schmidt.
Eric Schmidt.
Eric,
Jobs told Eric
Eric
Schmidt at
Schmidt.
in Palo Alto, there's a famous photo of it. If you release Android, I will spend every penny till my dying breath suing you over it. And they went ahead and did it. Steve ended up dying. Larry Ellison continued that lawsuit in post Steve Jobs' passing. And it only got resolved relatively recently. I don't know, 2 years ago. Go ahead.
Why doesn't
But the base,
writing go under that? I mean, writing has to be some kind of intellectual protectable property.
The
yeah, but
actual
like I said,
writing is protected.
it's the exact text. The exact text. Like
Yeah,
you can,
correct.
like
But you
plagiarism.
can
Plagiarism
parody
is,
style.
yeah.
PTR for Jobs Eric photo.
But this is where the text is much easier to settle because it's a black and white issue. Music is not because it's uh, variation of, you know, the lyric or the melody or combination of harmony and rhythm and melody and lyric. So if you get too close, then they'll come after you. So ask George Harrison. He got hit for "My Sweet Lord," sounding like what was that classic? He's so fine.
And you just
Anyway,
had the one a couple of years ago with was it Pharrell Williams and I always
oh my
forget
God. Oh
what
no, my home. Pharrell Williams and what's his name, the producer, the other producer on that, Mark Ronson.
Robin Thicke, right? So Robin
Yeah, the
Thicke and
Robin.
Pharrell Williams,
No,
and
no,
it
no.
was a big famous song that supposedly
Yes. No.
they were the courts ruled or the jury ruled they had ripped off the estate of Marvin Gaye. They had
Yes.
yeah,
Even more so, the Bruno Mars song, "Funktown," gonna give it to you, whatever that song was called. That song got sued by
Uptown Funk.
Uptown Funk, got sued and lost to 5 different estates
And overall, that song lost money. It cost him money to release that song.
because he lost intellectual property to 5 different estates for the likeness of 5 different other artists.
I don't
And
know if he
correctly
lost or
so.
he settled. By the way, on that,
Yeah.
did he lose or he
Well,
settled?
yeah. Either
Yeah,
way,
no, a big difference though. But yeah.
yeah.
Tom Waits won a suit over somebody using a voice that sounded like his voice, his distinctive voice. I sent the link to Cheryl from the LA Times.
Here's my point. What happens when you tell OpenAI, "Hey, make a song like Tom Waits"? His voice is so unique. Or Neil Young, also a very unique voice. There's no way around it. So anyway, um, the next
And the song
story.
I was talking about was "Blurred Lines," which was a really big song a couple of years
Yeah.
ago, and supposedly, yeah, okay.
Um, Wall Street Journal says they have sources that Instacart plans to, in their upcoming IPO, that the shares that are purchased or sold during that IPO will largely be from the pool that are the employees. The employees are going to be able to sell their shares right out as part of the IPO, which is kind of interesting. Normally, the employees are frozen for some, they have a lock in for 3, 6, 9 months, what have you, after the IPO. And in this case, they're the first ones to get their beak wet. It's kind of clever. And there's also another story.
I've seen it happen before. It's not the
Yeah,
first time.
it's not the first time. True. Instacart announces its connected stores ecosystem, including a smart cart that lets shoppers self checkout by detecting items placed in it, as I told you about, I don't know, a week ago. But the connected stores ecosystem sounds very, very cool. And I got to say, if we pin this article to the top, as I will do right now, the cart itself looks incredibly cool. And I can see how supermarkets would love to have these carts, these smart carts, and if they're all powered by Instacart. Anyway, Instacart gig workers have a smartphone app with scanning tools at their disposal to fulfill delivery orders, but what if regular shoppers could also use them? The grocery delivery service Instacart plans to get regular everyday shoppers into quote unquote connected stores where they'd use a rolling smart cart, an Instacart cart, with built in support for lists, order deli meats or baked goods, finding items and self checkout. The star of the show is Instacart's upgraded cart, a smart cart that can detect what items in your list are placed in based on computer vision and weight and checks them off of your app. It's got a big touchscreen that syncs with your grocery list from your app and an attached payment terminal so you can self checkout without waiting to use a terminal. This thing's genius, I gotta say. There you go. So they're going to partner with places to do those. So here
By the
comes
way, Tyler,
Instacart. Yes.
we've had something similar in the UK for quite a long time. You probably have in the States as well. We just self checkout. Like you grab a barcode scanner, stick it in your basket, and off you go. Obviously, it's a little
The
more
cart,
friction,
the,
but yeah.
the cart has a scanner?
No, you grab a scanner as you walk in the shop. It's just a
Yes.
barcode
It's a
scanner.
wireless scanner. Got it.
It's a
Yeah.
wireless barcode. You scan your barcode, chuck it in the bar, and you just walk out. It's all cool.
Yeah. The point is the wireless scanner is with you on the cart.
Yeah,
So you scan as you shop. Got it.
yeah. That's what we
Yeah.
But
do
what if you
in
put things
Waitrose in
in
the
and then
UK.
out and then in and then out? Would they
See,
be
Ben,
able to
this is a
plus
subtle,
minus?
this is a very subtle but important difference between uh, Brits and Americans. That could work in Britain. It will certainly work in Sweden. That would work absolutely fine in Sweden. In the US, that's not simple enough. That we would fuck that up.
Tyler, Netherlands has been
Well,
doing that a while as well.
Yeah, it would work perfectly fine in the Netherlands. It would work gangbusters in Sweden and a lot of other places. The reason that's not in America is because Americans are too stupid to do that.
well, the
Tyler,
Amazon stores already have it here in the U.S., so they already do that at the Amazon store. So it is in
so
place already.
so
You're not
my
no.
dad's grocery store in Orlando is already doing this. It's the grocery store's mobile app that he scans. And then he said for the first few times he would check out, they would go item by item through his cart and validate that he's not a liar. And
Right.
then they stopped doing it over time because he was honest. So verify, then trust. So
Yeah.
it in Orlando in retiree, well, it's not just a retirement area, but because they can't hire enough people, they're doing it. So uh, that flow might work.
Okay. So, well, in Sweden, what we do, we just walk up to the self checkout desk and you scan your shit and you walk out
So
on a
that's
trust
what we
system.
You
do here too.
know,
All Krogers are like that, self checkout.
and Tyler, in Uniqlo and GU, you don't even have to scan one by one. You just put everything there, and then you
Yes,
just stick everything out.
I, I did that recently. I went to a Uniqlo. I bought a whole bunch of shit. They took everything out of my basket, threw it on a looks like a little scan. It looks like a scale actually. It's a flat thing, and it rung up all 50 items at once. It was
Yes.
amazing. Yeah, it was
And we,
fantastic.
we do auto checkout here ourselves.
Yeah,
Nobody's watching us. Yes.
So, I
yeah.
mean, I think
So
this is a really good point to kind of talk about the difference between Amazon's approach at, I think it's their fresh stores, right, where they have the video surveillance
right,
versus just self checkout, which, as was mentioned by Adam, is very popular to handle the labor shortages here in the
right.
states. So and there's one camera. There's one camera, it's right in your face. They got a video of you, but that versus the surveillance. What are people's thoughts with regards to how efficient, how does it address the labor, but then also with regards to the invasiveness of the surveillance context.
David, I do feel like it's kind of weird getting your your video when you are scanning the items. I usually now pick up from you order online and you pick up outside. That's how I do the grocery. But there are stores in Dallas with prepared salads and stuff where there's nobody inside. You just walk through, go and pick up whatever. But there are cameras all around you, and you scan on your way out automatically through your phone or your app, and there is no human beings involved. I'm sure you've been through those kind of stores. I forgot the chain name. They have like prepared sandwiches, salads, drinks, and stuff like that. Not a huge store. It's just like an open area, and there are shelves. You just walk along and scan things, and there are QR codes uh, on everything. But the one at Kroger definitely kind of videos you, and your entire activity there is kind of videotaped.
And
Tyler, would you? Oh,
I'm still a COVID mask bandito on those, right? Because I'm still wearing masks indoors, and
Me
so I mean that. Yeah. So I mean, that's it. Just there's still this rising a bit of anxiety on privacy and video surveillance and things like that. So I just wanted to get some people's opinions on that. Sorry. Thanks.
Well, we
Okay.
can go one step better in the UK. If you look at my PTR, that little six-wheeled robot dude I mentioned him before, but there's some areas where you have about 20 of those just sitting chilling in a park, and then they go to the shop, to the co-op it's called here. The staff load it with groceries, and then it goes a mile or two to someone's house and just kind of stops outside the house and pings them on the app. They're completely self-driving, spend most of their time on the pavement, but they also cross roads and all the rest of it. They're pretty cool to watch. They're basically level 5 self-driving. Well, probably level 4. I've never seen any member of staff following them or having to get them out of trouble, though. They're pretty good. I've watched them for a couple of hours because I'm a big kid. So, yeah, they're fun.
Okay. So, well, the next two articles are related. It's here it goes. This Wall Street Journal, according to data, Chinese factories installed nearly 250,000 robots in 2021, up 45% year over year, and around 50% of the global total, adapting to challenging workforce and rising wages. And where did the other one go? Oh, despite a talent shortage, China's chip sector startups are cutting back on hiring plans due to the deteriorating macro environment and funding crunch. 250,000 robots added to Chinese factories.
So there's a labor shortage issue. I'm trying to understand what the
Yes.
what I'm not getting. So is there
No,
in China? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you got it. It's right. The labor rate is the doing wages are rising in China. There's uh, there's less younger people now. There's less working age people now than there were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And so the wage is going up, and the wage is going up so high that it's now cheaper to produce in Indonesia and Vietnam.
But how does that affect the stability? Okay, well, I'm sorry, the math in my brain's not catching up. So the wages have been going up, and we actually created like a quote unquote middle class over there, right? So, but
Right?
you're because of the the population bell curve. Because of the bell
Yes.
curve, there's only what is it? There's the inverse pyramid. The one kid is
It's an
supporting all
inverted
the
bell.
parents and
Yeah.
grandparents, right? Okay,
Yes.
so now we're at an inflection point where the need for just labor, they need to throw robots at the labor that needs to get done. But I'm just
Yes.
kind of so that's not going to be a pressure point on the riots in the streets or anything like that. I suppose that's what I'm trying to focus on. Is this any kind of inflection point that will start to cultivate some labor
Here's my point.
unrest and social unrest?
Here's my point: is robots will cost the same more or less, with a small degree of variance internationally. They'll be a little cheaper in places where they're made, like in China. However, the cost of labor varies tremendously from Scandinavia to Southeast Asia. So these robots, if they're already making economic sense in the factories of China, they're going to make 10 times more sense in Scandinavia.
In automation, if we just call it automation, also right, because there's mobile robots, and then there's just reducing labor because you've got some bigger machine. That's been going on for a long time, but the cost of robots. I think one of the big issues, and we've talked about that in this room. Is they don't pay taxes. So
Yes.
for to let the
And
companies just replace warm bodies,
yeah,
warm paying bodies
yes,
with some steel,
yes,
that's something that the governments need to kind of really examine and take a look at as well.
yes. And despite the fact that nearly everything is getting more expensive, there's one thing that's getting much, much cheaper each year, which is robots.
That's right.
Their wage is going down every year.
Unless we
And we'll
carbon cost, right? The cost of the steel production. Um, I'm just saying that relative to a human
David,
driving to work in a fossil fuel car, I'm not,
right.
you have to take a look at the whole picture. But
Robot
David,
tax.
it might actually be greener to use robots than humans.
Right, right. Production versus actually work. Yeah, when they're working.
Because the human requires food every few hours.
So we need a hat for a robot that has a solar panel, so the robot can just get juiced up with renewable.
You as the human are dirty. You're dirty energy. You're carbon emitting. You know. Anyway, I have a solar powered factory here. These robots aren't consuming anything but pure sunlight. Anyway,
Hey, Tyler, as a
there we
quick
go.
update to the
Yeah,
FTX story. So FTX has
yeah,
come out talking about
yeah.
the issue in Britain. They're saying that that's not them. That it's they think they're saying it's some other company that's trying to make believe that they're them or something. But it's
Okay, okay. Just to refresh, yeah, we did those, and now we're going into the tweets as we do. And the first one I have is BB, who also found the one about the iPhone 14 Pro camera shaking issues. People are complaining. I imagine that will get fixed with the software update in the next iOS update. BB also found this one from South China Morning Post that Beijing must provide more support to develop lab-grown protein sector. More help is needed from the government to guide researchers and companies into the cultured meat sector, says someone named Sebastian Joy, president of ProVeg, a non-profit organization, who probably has some financial self-interest in saying that. Huawei is courting Thailand, Indonesia with supply chain support. Embattled Chinese tech champion Huawei deepens foothold in Southeast Asia. That's true. Huawei is quite very, very popular in Thailand for sure. So is Xiaomi. Um, and I think that will continue to be the case. Um, what's this one? Telemed abortion is expanding into parts of the United States. A company called Wisp is offering abortion pills in 6 new states. In others, it's illegal or other. That's interesting. Telemedicine abortion. Hmm. I guess you can if you're someone who is looking to have an abortion in Texas and you do a Zoom call with someone who's not in Texas, the person not in Texas isn't really violating Texas laws at that point. I would assume.
Yeah, but how the doctor is prescribing in a state they are not licensed in? The physician have to have the license of every single state they prescribe medicine in.
Hmm. Next up, okay, let's skip that one. Valerie has one about Department of Justice Criminal Division rethinking policy on corporate employees using personal messaging apps, as they should. And custom officials have copied Americans' phone data at massive scale. Oh, there you go. Customs officials, meaning the immigration desks at airports, they're building databases. Yes, of course. I have news for you that the journalists don't know about yet. They're building uh, police departments are building massive DNA databases. They already have fingerprint databases. They're building face print databases um, at scale. Police departments and immigration desks all over the place. And then the federal government is going to aggregate that into a federal database, which would fall under CISA, NSA, which Snowden no doubt has been telling people, but perhaps not in the way that people know. Although I got my own first very pleasurable taste of that when I returned from when I entered America 2 weeks ago for the first time in a decade, and the immigration desk, I handed my passport, I put it on the desk, handing it over to the agent, who never touched it and said, "Welcome, Mr. Crowley," and then just that was the end of the that was it, without ever opening my passport. So clearly, I'm
Wow.
in the
So
database.
you're not global entry.
No, nor do I need to be. They have a
Yeah, oh,
they
that's
have a
right.
data,
You don't come back that much.
right? And my face is in their database, so uh, there you go. The Eric, you had one about living longer.
Yeah, it
It
was
says
just a very geeky detail about the telomerase interactions. I actually wanted to ask John about it, so I tagged him, but seems like we missed him today, so better luck next time with that one. But fascinating. I just wanted some more context, so if anyone wants to take a look at that article, please do take a look.
I
I
just
would like
retweeted that.
where what about telomerase?
The article says researchers have discovered a new structure of telomeric DNA with the aid of physics and a tiny magnet. Uh, and the headline says, "Can we live longer? Physicists' breakthrough discovery in genetic protective layer." And what else do we got? Um,
That's more of a philosophical issue, I think, as well. I mean, now that we're seeing that life on Earth is a zero sum game based on all the carbon, consumption and all these things. I mean, I think it's time for humanity to have just to take a step back and really, really look at that whole kind of the longevity and have more conversations about, trying to line up your physical lifespan with your mental lifespan. That's another thing with the rise of dementia and things like that. Anyways, that is not just a physics and biological conversation. To me, those sciences kind of feed into a larger philosophical conversation we need to have.
okay. Um,
Dementia is a
from
disease that can probably be cured. So,
Yeah, it's preventable. Dementia and all the neurodegenerative diseases are preventable. And these longevity studies doesn't even mean that right now perhaps they are aiming for increasing your biological age. It's more geared towards reversing the age-related damage in the body. And telomere shortening and expedition of telomere shortening is how your cell age faster. And immunosenescence, which is like cellular aging, or your older cells lose the capacity to kind of divide and have like healthier cells. But with the telomerase activity, you can perhaps have healthier cells for longer durations, which means reduce pathological changes in your body as long as you're living, instead of just at the end of the life, or later stages, the geriatric population living with many assistance based treatments and stuff. So perhaps just reducing the pathology or reversing diseases and aging is the game here, not about living longer. But very fascinating study. I was studying, I mean, reading 2 or 3 days ago in this regards. Again, the telomerase can help us reversing in many pathological, especially when the cells divide themselves with a genetic or injury because of free radicals. Your cells are damaged. So telomerase can help there, but only, I'm not sure if it's like applicable now. It's like in theory.
I
Yeah,
was
so
going
I
to
think
say
Aram, isn't
dementia
there a?
is not curable
Oh, sorry.
now, but I'm just saying it's potentially curable. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
isn't there
and
a
in
risk,
theory,
Aram, with
not applicable yet.
with the enzyme telomerase? Isn't there a risk of increased cancer though? I thought I understood
Exactly.
last time I
So
looked at it.
all theoretical right now, nothing applicable. I haven't seen any. So in theory, yes, but in reality, much more long ways to go.
okay, so next up, um, we have this one that the Department of Homeland Security awards nearly $700 million to researchers. Toddler, sorry. Oh, maybe it's Amanda.
Amanda,
It was Amanda.
your mic.
Yeah. Amanda, mute your. I'm muting you. Don't unmute yourself. Thanks. DHS awards nearly $700 million to researchers monitoring extremism in video games. The researchers will use the funds to develop a set of best practices and centralized resources for game makers to monitor extremist activity. Russian diplomat suggests attacks on satellites is possible reference to Starlink. Russia wasn't happy about Starlink providing broadband in Ukraine after the invasion. I bet they aren't, because that, believe it or not, that entire Russian invasion could have gone entirely different, and just as Putin had intended, without Musk intervening and bringing in Starlink for communications. And Ukraine even kind of hints. They said more than 100,000 people in Ukraine, including the top, you know, folks involved, were dependent on Starlink for communications because Putin couldn't blow it up and take it out. And that potentially, more than any other thing, might win the MVP if when this thing finally gets settled. Starlink might win the MVP for that particular move, because at that critical moment, when you don't have communications early on in something like that, you're in deep doo doo. And Starlink was an absolute godsend at that moment. And I imagine the confidence that Russia had in being able to do this was predicated on the fact that they had already mapped out all of the communications channels and how to disarm them and blow them up, and which would send Ukraine into total disarray. And in fact, the opposite happened, and Starlink played an incredibly significant role in that, and it's truly amazing. By the way, just in recent hours, Elon tweeted out that Starlink is now active everywhere on the planet, including Antarctica. So there you go.
Is there a reason why NATO or a government entity or the United States couldn't have made this proffer, number one? And number two, do we think this would make Elon Musk a target of Russia?
Well, he already said. Russian diplomat says that the satellite the Russian diplomat was threatening that by supporting Ukraine in this way, you are violating, that you yourself have made yourself a target. And then Elon tweeted, "If I disappear mysteriously, it's been nice knowing you," or whatever.
Yep,
So
there was a lot of concerns because of his safety and how the Russians were kind of threatening his life. And based on what he did for the Ukrainian, he was getting threats, and not only threats, like the people around him were getting really concerned for his security because the way he flies and move from place to place.
right, I imagine that the
Didn't he also,
Russia.
Tyler, say that, like, hey guys, if if something happens to me, I did not commit suicide. I am not
Right,
going to commit suicide.
yeah.
I remember
That
that.
sends a message right there.
I can, yeah. What the little,
That's a very
little.
popular netizens move to say, I'm not going to suicide.
So I imagine Russia now is, and the reason why would this diplomat bring this up now? Because when you start coming to the realization that you're losing, there's some people have a tendency to start wanting to blame it on something and look back as to where did we screw up, and why and how did we lose this. And I imagine they will quickly, this Starlink issue that I'm describing will come near to the top of their list of things that they weren't able to account for, and they're going to say, well, we everything would have gone to plan except for that pesky Starlink thing that we had no idea was going to come into play, because we were going to bomb their stuff, and we did, and everything would have gone just great had Elon not done that. And Elon's going to come into Russia's uh, crosshairs as, the reason that things didn't go their way as they had planned.
Was Starlink really the only satellite internet option, though? I mean, I had satellite internet 20 years ago on a motorhome, 25 years ago. I mean, it was one way. I'm pretty sure there's more options than just Starlink.
Maybe, perhaps not as expeditiously as Elon might have a reputation for doing. Like
And if it's a
when,
newer system, it's not going to potentially not have as many exploits available. So I think the fact that it hasn't gone down is also a testament to SpaceX.
Actually, there were some jamming efforts, and then Elon expeditiously, kind of told his team to take care of that issue. They updated it in real life and also reduced the energy consumption within a day. And that kind of, took care of the problem that they were having. And I think American Defense Department were observing and are collecting data in terms of how fast Tesla or Elon and SpaceX were able to do all these changes in real time.
One other point, which is there's one of Putin's former speechwriters did an interview that I just watched yesterday, where he said something that I found incredibly interesting, that the situation where the Ukrainians have been able to push back the Russians in Donbass is far more significant than Westerners realize, because Russians domestically have a narrative in their culture that that the Ukrainians are not as proficient as the Russians are. That the Ukrainians are the little inept stepbrother, or not as capable, or will use the word, you write the rest of that sentence yourself. And so the fact that this perceived lesser state is kicking their ass violates their own mental superiority. And so they are now reckoning that they are actually less than the people that they thought were less than them. And that is having a very strong impact on the Russian psyche at the moment.
But also specifically on, as I've been in some of these articles on, now you have a whole lot more people kind of pointing the finger at Putin, because a lot of that's being kind of rooted on how he's led the whole effort. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see how that unfolds as well, because that's going to be the linchpin that really kind of ends to an end of the war. Him kind of like finding a pivot that reduces the violence, or just some other kind of way for them to kind of address it collectively.
Okay. Lockheed Martin delivers a record 300 kilowatt laser weapon to U.S. military. It's the most powerful laser to date to the U.S. military's Office of the Under Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Laser beams, freaking laser beams.
So Star Wars
I think it's
More or
more
less.
the
from the
drone
80s.
for the drones, because laser weapon is one of the most effective weapon to deal with the drones.
All the Star Wars laser stuff, actually, that like happened in terms of the development of that technology long ago. I have personal friends that were associated or part of just lots of that, and we've got some pretty interesting weapon systems that we don't have, we wouldn't hear about so much.
Are they more efficient now that we have these low Earth orbit satellites that could be utilized, or is that not something that they can be? Do you know what I mean? There's so many
Yeah,
more satellites in the sky.
I think a lot of yeah. Well, I think that a lot of the I'm not the expert. My friends
Right.
are. And I'm sure they'd tell you, yeah, we can do a lot. Is what they'd probably say.
Thanks, David.
We now have a laser iron dome called Light Beam that's about to be deployed.
That's right. The new Israeli Iron Dome 2.0. Now, this time with lasers, which, by the way, will be far cheaper than the rocket version, as I understand it. Norm, can you confirm that?
Absolutely, because laser beams are cheaper than little missiles.
Right. Yeah, significantly. And yeah, easier to keep stock of and whatnot, and can't be exhausted. Because I think one of the strategies that the rocket launchers use is to try and overwhelm it with a significant, launching 1,000 rockets simultaneously to try and overwhelm it, because you have a limited number of supply of physical counter rockets, right? But a laser can be relatively. I wonder, how do you overwhelm a laser? How many will it be able to handle? So,
with a mirror.
right. Well, they're
No,
all pointed.
I'm serious.
You'll need
With a
a
mirror.
big, very big hot air balloon for that laser. By the way,
Yep. Wouldn't it be able to destroy the mirror though?
No, not if it's a good mirror. I don't think so. If a good clean
you can
mirror,
Depends on
get
the wavelength of the laser.
yeah, I guess that's true. And what the mirror's made from.
how are you getting the mirror high up in the sky would be the other question. So that does it for the end of today. Thank you to everybody for all your tweets and brilliant comments, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
Okay, Ben has a room coming up in 8 minutes. I'm just going to pin it on top now.
Thanks, Tyler, Cheryl.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.